Rock and roll may live forever, but we only retire once. Kevin Lamour of Our Financial Plans and Quadris Investment Services offers a large range of financial solutions from some of the biggest leaders in the investment and insurance landscape of Canada. See how a solid financial plan built with friendly and professional advice can help. Find out more at ourfinancialplans.ca or give them a call at 705-949-1316. G'day, folks, and welcome to another episode of the Lonesome Cowboy Podcast. And today I have on with us a Juno nominated artist. We don't get those very often on this show because because we're just talking to everyday musicians that just do things, and awards are never in their usual future for us. But this guy, Douglas John Cameron, is on the show to tell us all about how to get a Juno. No?
That's actually not true because I never did win the Juno.
Well, that's true. Well, you
Um,
got nominated, so that's cool.
I got nominated. I was nominated.
Okay. Well, how to get
Um,
nominated for one? Well, I know how to get nominated for one. Just pay the fee and away you go, right?
it's a little more complicated than that,
Oh, I know.
and it was a long time ago. So and
Hmm.
things in the world were different in those days, and
Okay.
so um, do we are we do you
Well,
want to know about it?
sure, go for it. I want to know about your Junos because I mean it's
So
something.
okay, so I think what's interesting is that I'm a normal person. I'm a normal musician. I've been a musician since I was 4. I started performing publicly when I was 5.
Nice.
By the age of 9, I was writing songs, and in my own sort of hometown way, I started playing in bands and at folk clubs, and this is all back in the late 60s, early 70s into the
Sure.
70s. Um, and then I progressed from there to play in more bands, and then uh, in the 80s, uh, uh, it's a bit of an adventure and it's a bit of a long story, but I ended up writing a song which got made into a video,
Mona with the
and
children.
Mona with the Children.
And I'm glad that's
Uh,
why I wanted you to talk about it because I have that's where I was going to lead.
well, I had wrote I wrote the song
Hmm.
at the time. At the time, I was an active member of the Baha'i Faith,
Okay.
and the story of Mona was of a young woman in Iran who in the early 1980s was imprisoned with a number of other women because they were Baha'is and they were executed. That story didn't really get out to the world, but some refugees from Iran, Baha'is who came to Canada, began to tell that story because they knew the story. And I was in the process of doing music in the Baha'i community. I was doing recordings and concerts, and it was suggested to me that I write a song about Mona, which I did eventually. At first, I was reluctant because I thought it's a terrible subject, a young person being executed for their faith. But then I got the inspiration. The word dancing came into my head, and I realized, oh, maybe you could write a song about this young woman's spirit and the idea of dancing and all of that. And I wrote the song. Initially, it was just kind of heard within the Baha'i community, but at a certain point, a group of people decided that in the Baha'i community, decided they wanted to make a music video of the
Mm.
song. And they raised the money and proceeded to make a music video. Now, I had a parallel story to this is that I was trying to be a pop star. I had made recordings and demos and played in bands and done all kinds of things and
Cool.
tried to become a pop star, tried to get a record deal. Couldn't get a record deal. Got turned down by every record label that anybody could think of.
Gotcha.
So at the moment when this Mona video was being made, I didn't really care about a career because I decided to go back to university, get a degree, become a teacher, have a career, make a living.
Get a real job.
Which, well, as because in attempting to be a pop star, I wasn't making any money,
Gotcha.
and it didn't look like I was going to make any money anyway. So, but this group of people went ahead and made the video, and I was in the video, and I sang it, and right at the day that we were shooting, the first day that we were shooting the video, Bernie Finkelstein from True North Records
Yep.
called up. There'd been a bit of a blurb in the newspaper about it. Bernie called up the fellow that I was working with at the time. Um, Bernie was aware of me because he was one of the people that had turned me down, and he said, "I want to put out this single, this Mona with the Children. I want to put out this single on True North Records, but there has to be an artist and an album." And so overnight, Douglas Cameron, in those days I was Doug Cameron. Doug Cameron was an artist on True North Records. Within a few months, we had an album produced that was essentially all the demos that I had presented to Bernie that he had turned down.
Wow.
And the song was on the radio. And more importantly, the video, because in 1985, when this occurred, Much Music had just started. Videos were a big deal. They were
Yeah.
a new thing.
Yeah.
And this was a particularly dramatic video because of the content and the story. And I, for a very brief time, had a career as a pop star.
Well, there you go.
And I was nominated for a Juno as a result because Mona with the Children got a lot of airplay. Never sold enough records for me to get a second record deal, but it got a lot of airplay,
Yeah.
and it became quite well known. And
And
I was nominated as Most Promising Male Vocalist. Now, this is a category they no longer have. Um,
now I just have to ask a question because I watched the video.
yes,
Is that you in the red beret?
yes, that is me.
There you go. I look, I'm going, that is a very young Douglas. My God.
It was a very young Douglas, yes, indeed. Um,
Yeah. You got a case of the OLD.
well, there you go. That's what I mean when it's a long time ago. I mean, what is it, 40 years ago? Is it 50 years? I
85,
think it's,
50 now.
is it, is it 50 years ago?
Yeah,
Yes,
85.
I guess that's true. That's true because I
Yep.
was, oh, wait a minute. No, I was
No,
30
wait,
at the
40.
time. It's 40 years, yeah.
40 years, 45.
40 years ago.
Okay.
And like in those days, everything was geared to radio airplay.
Hmm.
Records, and that was the deal. Mona with the Children was a top 20 song in Canada. It was a top 10 song in Toronto. The song was in heavy rotation. The video was on Much Music all the time, and it really, and it was a dramatic story. And up to a certain point, True North and CBS Records, who distributed True North at the time, pushed, promoted the whole business, and so for and I always like to say that for about 6 months, I had a great career as a pop singer, and then it started to go like this.
And then
I
away you
didn't re
go.
but it took me 2 years to figure that out, and because I kept trying. After Mona with the Children, even though I didn't win a Juno, um, I kept writing and recording, and I tried to get another record deal and got turned down by all the record companies in Canada. And so my career as a pop star evaporated. And I eventually went back to university, got a degree in music, studied singing, tried to become a teacher, didn't get accepted at teachers college, and ended up working writing music for television.
Excellent. That was my next topic.
Which led to my second peripheral Juno nomination because I wrote a bunch of songs for a TV show called Ants in Your Pants, which was on Treehouse TV, and the CD that we put out got nominated as Best Children's
Nice.
CD in whatever year that was. I can't remember, and that was in the 90s, middle
Cool.
90s, I guess.
So,
And yeah. So and to put it into perspective, I never had the big pop music career, and
uh-huh.
the TV writing music for TV was a job.
Yeah.
I went to a studio every day. I wrote music every day. in some cases, it was like an assembly line job. It was a job. I made a living, and and because I was a songwriter and because I had all this experience, when I did work in children's television, it was great because I wrote a ton of songs,
Sure.
and that was part of my thing. And I'll say one thing.
Hmm.
When Ants in Your Pants was in its at its height, and it was on, it was on the air 4 times a day, 7 days a week,
Yeah.
across the country. It was huge, and I became a star. If you were under the age of 5, I was a huge star.
Awesome.
If you were over the age of 5, forget it. Nobody knew me. But
There you go.
and at the time, I did a lot of live performing for kids, including at Ontario Place here in Toronto. And I was performing at Ontario Place, and I was singing the Ants in Your Pants theme song. And I look out at a crowd, a couple hundred people, I guess it was, maybe 150, 200 people. They're all singing the song Ants in Your Pants with me, and they're all doing the actions. And I thought, Douglas, you wrote 2 hit songs in your life. The first
Okay.
one was Mona with the Children,
Yeah.
and the second one was Ants in Your Pants. Definition of a hit song.
Yeah. No
Everybody
kidding.
knows it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. That's the thing. So let me ask you actually about composing for TV because you've done it for a few different TV shows. Um, I've always wanted to try it, but I felt that maybe I shouldn't try it because I don't know how to play piano. And I noticed a lot of composers for things like movie scores and scores for television and themes are piano composers. Is that pretty safe to say that when you're going to make something like that, you need to have that 88 or so keys to cover the proper arrangement?
well, I'm sure there are composers who don't play the piano.
Hmm.
Um, the thing is that and when I started working in television, things shifted from the world of sort of live studio sessions with real musicians and real studio and all of that stuff to working in a room with a computer. And in order to work in a room with a computer and write music for TV or film, you pretty much need to be able to play a keyboard. However, you don't necessarily have to be the world's best keyboard player. And I've known people in that world who were not the greatest piano players. I had one very good friend who worked in that world who was a classical guitarist.
Hmm.
I knew another fellow who was a drummer, and he was a great. And he always worked with a partner. He would often work with somebody who could, who could do the keyboard stuff
Yeah, right.
and all of that. So is it a helpful skill? Absolutely. Is it a completely necessary skill? I'm sure there are ways around it. And I've been out of that game for a little while, so and I know that that game has changed even dramatically since I got out of it, and it's become much more, libraries of music that are made available to television producers, as opposed to hiring a composer for, to do the original stuff. I know it still happens, but um, what I always thought when I worked in television is that there were certain things I was good at, and
Hmm.
because I played stringed instruments, guitar and mandolin and ukulele and et cetera, et cetera,
Sure.
there was always something for me to do because those were instruments that it was hard to fake on the computer, whereas
Gotcha.
anything else, orchestral instruments, whatever. So but I was, and the rule in the world of composers for television and film is that you're asked, "Can you do this?" And you say, "Yes, I can," whether or not you can or
And
not.
you worry about
And
figuring it out later.
then you figure it out later. And so I ended up in, writing orchestral stuff that I had no business doing at all.
Gotcha.
But I had this thing that I used to do, and I still do it from time to time. I'd have to come up with a really great bass part, and I wouldn't be capable of it. So I'd think of who did I know that was the very best bass player that I'd ever worked with, and I'd try to channel them for like 35 seconds or whatever it
Nice.
was, and just allow myself to kind of go for it. There were things I was good at, and there were things that I wasn't so good at. But it was a it you know I made a living,
That's the main thing, isn't it?
which, well, up to that point, even as a so-called pop star, I had never really made
Yeah, yeah,
um, a solid living. So,
yeah. That's great. Um, I was listening before we started this to you doing 6 days on the road, and I would love to be able to cover a song and really make it different. But and that's got to be because of all that wonderful training you have. But how did you hear that in a minor key and you used that classical guitar piece, I think, or was it piano? Sorry, it
oh,
was Beethoven, I
it
think.
was for Elise.
Fur yeah. So you started with Fur and you ended up because it had 6 days on the road on the title, and I went, and then he starts with Fur and I went, Douglas, come on. And then you went into it, and I
Well,
went, okay, Douglas. Now my brain would never go there. I would never think to take something that's a three-chord wonder and turn it into that kind of thing. It was just wow. What?
well,
Where? I don't get it. I
it's
just don't
part
get
of
it.
it's part of a larger issue.
Okay.
Um, and I can't take credit entirely because the idea to do 6 days on the road in this fashion came from a guy named Chris Cool, who's a wonderful banjo player
Okay.
here in Toronto. And I heard a recording of him doing it in a very modal, very kind of traditional banjo style, and that's where I got that. But it was also part of something else that happened. So you know, I like to fool around with music. I feel that, and I get into trouble sometimes with this. I feel that, someone has done a great recording of a song, or written a song in a certain way. That's wonderful. I want to know, how can I do it differently? What can I do that makes it more interesting for me, and puts my brand on it, and at the same time pays homage to the original.
Right.
And this all started. I was wandering around with my guitar. There's an old bluegrass gospel song called "This World Is Not My Home." This world is not my home. I'm just passing through. My treasures are laid up somewhere beyond the blue. I learned this song when I was 9 years old at summer camp. And if you listen to it, it's done in a major key. It's up tempo. It's a real barn burner.
Uh-huh.
I was walking around playing it in F minor, really slow, and singing it, and just fooling around with it. And I thought, oh, that's kind of cool. Now, since COVID, I'd been recording and videoing songs and putting them up on YouTube, just because during COVID there wasn't much else to do, and it was a great way to play and have fun. And so I put up "This World Is Not Your Home," um, um, and in F minor, and I swung. It was swung, so it was like a real boom, and it's on the YouTube, so you can look
I'm
it up and
going
hear it.
to.
Um, and I got more views than I've ever got for a video.
Isn't that something, eh?
I put up a video, I get 250, 300 views, maybe 500 if I'm lucky. I got thousands, 12,000. And I remember monitoring it because I put it up, and about a day later, I thought, oh, I should look and see if I've gotten any views, 500 views in a day. And then next thing I know, 1,000 views. And I'm watching it kind of go up, and I'm thinking, well, why? Like, why this particular song? And I thought, well, it's because I put it in a minor key. It's got to be because I put it in a minor key, which I don't think was the reason. So then I started doing more songs in minor keys.
I'm gonna have to.
Just for,
That'll be the first step then. Just take it and go in a minor key.
well, it doesn't work for every song. But what I did was I went through songs that I really loved, and songs that I, and I tried them. And so I created a whole body of work on YouTube. I call it the Minor League.
Ah,
And I have a playlist that's called the Minor League, and all these songs. I never got the response again that I got to that first one.
uh-huh.
And 6 days on the road. So after I worked in television, I taught piano privately and I taught guitar and piano, and I taught a lot of kids, and every kid wants to play for Elise. Every kid there is that plays the piano has to learn for Elise,
Okay.
and and they want to learn it right away. Like they don't want to spend the 2 or 3 years learning what they have to learn so they can play for Elise. They just want to play for Elise.
Yeah.
Shut up, let me play for Elise. And so I worked out arrangements for it on ukulele and piano, or there are arrangements on piano that kids can play that aren't that complicated. And so I learned it on the guitar as well, and it just worked with 6 days on the
I love
road.
it.
And I thought, I wonder if Beethoven or Dave Dudley are rolling in their graves. I don't know how that's going to work.
I gotta love it. So, part of the things that we talk about are the business of music here on the program. And Duncan has become a great example of creative ways when it comes to booking venues and working with venues and stuff like that. What do you kind of think that venues can do to help today's musician just have a better experience? I know most are doing a great job, but there are a few that have been encountered. So, I mean, what's the missing ingredient in a few of them?
Well, um, so I find this very interesting because I'm not very good at the business end of things. And as you've said, my friend Duncan Fremlin, who I play with in Whiskey Jack,
Yeah,
is very good at it. But I mean, he comes from a bit of that background as well,
true.
uh, in his various careers paths. I've come to the conclusion, and I experienced this recently with you in Sault Ste. Marie at the Loft.
Okay.
Am I calling it right? Is it called the Loft?
It
Because
is the loft. Yep.
for a while there, I was calling it the Lounge, and I was getting into trouble.
No, people are going to go, where's that?
The Loft, which I think an incredible venue, a great place to play,
And I know.
bar none,
Yeah.
a real treasure, and perfectly suited for the Whiskey Jack sort of kind of thing. Right
Hmm.
size, everything about it. Um, and recently we played in Toronto at a place called the Cameron House,
Yep. Heard of that, of course.
which has been there since the 70s, and the Horseshoe, which the Horseshoe Tavern, which predates even that. It's probably from the 40s or something.
Yeah.
And and in terms of what a venue can do to help a musician, the thing that these venues do is that they already have an audience.
True.
So there are people that go to the Cameron. Doesn't matter who's playing, they go to the Cameron. There are people that will go to the Horseshoe because it's the Horseshoe. The Loft. That audience was willing to go to the Loft, climb 3 floors of stairs to get upstairs to hear this band play. Now it's not the only reason that people
Hmm.
come, but when Whiskey Jack, for instance, goes out and plays, we are most successful when we do not have to bring the entire audience.
Ah,
When I mean, hopefully we're attracting an audience, but the venue itself has already either existed long enough or done the work to create an audience that a clientele, I guess would be the word, that then an act can come in. I mean, the thing about Whiskey Jack and the thing about me is that we're not that well known in terms of like we're not Jim Cuddy,
right.
uh,
Yeah.
we're not Blue Rodeo, we're not whoever. We're a little bit down the rung in terms of our notoriety. And yet we can go into a place like that and have an incredibly successful show. But it's, I think, largely based on that there. And in the case of the Loft, we also had some help from some local people to promote it, word of
Yes.
mouth, and whatever else. Um, the other thing that's wonderful about the Loft is you have a great sound system. You have a wonderful sound technician. They're there. They're eager. They're into it. When Whiskey Jack, we often play in small theaters, not unlike the Loft or a little bit bigger, and they will usually have somebody great on the soundboard. If it's really great, they'll have somebody sort of stage managing. Um, and we do a lot of gigs where we are responsible for everything. We bring the PA, we're getting the audience out, and sometimes those are successful. And sometimes they are not as successful. But thanks to Duncan's, entrepreneurial spirit, he will go pretty much anywhere. The other thing that Duncan and I do is we play at provincial parks in the summertime.
Yes, he's told me about that. I think that's just awesome. Yeah,
Captive audience,
I know.
captive audience.
I've put in for it. I never got picked.
Well, I'm not sure that. I mean, not all the parks do it, and
Yeah.
Duncan has created relationships with many of them. But it's fun. It's the money's not huge, but it's total fun. And as I say, it's a captive audience. They're in the park. It's the only show
In
that day.
town.
Your other options are go swimming, uh, have
Walking
a
the bugs.
yeah, walking the bugs. No, and that sort of also proves my point, or supports my point, that if an audience is being created, that you don't have to create, because that's the real hard part. And I face that here in Toronto. I in fact, in the last 6 months or so, I've been playing at a little restaurant out in the East End that has entertainment on Tuesday nights, and one of their entertainers had to cancel, and I got called, would I go? And I went, and I've done it a few times, and on occasion I'll bring out a few people. But there's a lot of stuff in people's lives, and if I'm responsible for bringing out the audience, unless I'm, Blue Rodeo or somebody, I keep saying them, but they're the only band I can think of. Unless I'm somebody with a really big draw, it's hit or miss. And it doesn't matter how good you are. It doesn't matter how entertaining you are. People don't necessarily go out to hear live music um, at the drop of a hat. I don't. It takes something pretty special to get me to go out. Usually, it's I know the person, I have some connection to them, and I want to support them, or I want to hear them. Um, and it's a lot of work. And I don't know if I'm being helpful in this answer,
Oh, no,
but
very much.
I I s- I thrive on the fact that I have a relationship with someone like Duncan, who is better at this than me. And there's a tenacity involved as well. I know. I mean, the other person I know in Toronto, well, one other person I know in Toronto who is a musician getting gigs, but is also now involved in booking Hughes Room, is a guy named Michael Acapinti.
Okay.
He's a well-known jazz musician here in Toronto, but he's also a bit of he's involved in booking acts at Hughes Room, and he's on the phone all the time, you know, all the time. He's either trying to book gigs or getting, it's like it's a full-time job.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And when what the brief brush I had with pop stardom, at True North Records, I was around when Bruce Cockburn, Murray McLaughlin, Rough Trade were on the label.
Yep.
And I remember, and I watched Bernie Finkelstein work. He spent his life on the phone talking to people, either getting his artists gigs or getting his artist's music played on the radio. He was on the phone
Yeah.
all the time. Um, and so, I'm in a bit of I guess I'm in a pretty great situation because I have, a partnership with somebody who's good at getting gigs. And I'm at a point in my life where I'm not looking to conquer the world anymore. So if I get to play 2 or 3 times a month, I'm usually pretty happy. And the money is, I don't want to play for nothing, but sometimes the money's great, sometimes the money's not so great. It's always been thus even when at the height of my pop stardom, and I remember my children's career as well. I remember getting paid a phenomenal amount of money for like a half-hour show
That's
somewhere.
what
And I
somebody
remember,
told me. Do a kids album, do a kids show.
well, there's something to it. I mean, and I also did a lot of shows for nothing or
Yeah.
next to nothing. And, I've done shows where there were 3 people, and I've done shows where there were 3,000 people. And I think to myself, how, I don't know, how does this work? As a performer, as a musician, you don't do anything different. If there
Mm,
are three people or 3,000, you do what you do.
yeah.
Uh,
Well, Douglas, I don't mean to jump on the subject here, but I'm a cheap bugger and I don't want to pay the gajillion dollars that Zoom wants to give me meetings longer than 40 minutes. So
oh, okay. Oh,
anyway,
that makes
so
it.
yeah, it gives me a countdown at least. So in the final 8 minutes and change that I have here, tell the
Oh,
folks what you got coming up, if anything, new projects or new stuff or gigs, what's on the go?
well, Whiskey Jack are carrying on.
Yep.
Mostly now in Ontario. We've done a fair amount of playing down east. I do believe we're going out west in September to Terrace Bay
Terrace Bay, yeah, that's about
in BC.
yeah, that's towards Thunder Bay. So Terrace Bay's kind of in between.
Oh no, this is in British Columbia, so
Oh,
it's
different
not
Terrace
Terrace
Bay.
Bay. Must be Terrace. Anyway,
Yeah.
Prince Rupert.
Oh, way up there.
Um,
Okay, you're really going.
yeah, and Toronto. I mean, we're carrying on around Toronto, and in the summer we're doing the parks. I've been working since I retired from teaching piano. I've been working on my songwriting kind of thing, and I'm hoping to promote it a bit more and do gigs as just myself.
Cool.
Um, and I mean, I feel like it's probably not it's probably a fairly localized cottage industry kind of thing that I'm involved in, and there there's a great scene in Toronto with the Cameron and the Horseshoe and a bunch of other little places like that.
Hmm.
And Whiskey Jack has had a lot of fun down east, and you never know, something might happen. I'm yeah.
Open to
I
it
I don't.
all.
I would encourage people to look at my YouTube channel, Douglas
Yes,
John Cameron,
they definitely
because
should.
there's a whole range of stuff on there, and especially my minor league project.
Yeah.
I'm thinking I'm hoping to put out a couple of albums
Of that kind of stuff.
in. Well, one is definitely called The Minor League,
Okay.
and the other is it's called Americana Motel.
Oh, nice.
And it's songs that I wrote and recorded sort of through COVID and since, with a kind of rootsy kind of feel.
There you go.
And I'm going to stream those soon. And Whiskey Jack has a new video coming out for OLD, our hit song.
Great song. Way to go. That's a hell of a tune. Folks, do look up Douglas John Cameron. Do Douglas John Cameron because I think if you do Doug Cameron or Douglas Cameron, you're going to get somebody different. So look him up and definitely his YouTube channel because there's a lot of great stuff there. And yeah, Douglas, can't thank you enough for being on the
Oh,
program, man.
my
Uh,
pleasure.
and it was a
And
pleasure to share the stage for you for one song. It was
oh, that was
the
great. No,
biggest thrill
no,
of my life, I got to tell
no,
you,
it
man.
was that was fabulous. And I have to tell you, I had a band called the Lonesome Cowboys.
Yeah, you were saying. I
I
know.
had a band in
Yeah.
Peterborough.
Yeah.
Yeah, very briefly.
You write a wicked country song, sir. I can tell you
Oh,
that. Yeah.
well, thank you.
All right,
Thank
man.
you very much.
Thanks again.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.